Night had a way of folding itself into my lap like an old shawl, and that night, the forest held its breath, as if waiting for something that might forgive the world. I found him bound to the roots of the old oak by memory and silence, a great form of armor and regret that did not belong to the living world but clung to it as a wound might cling to bone. I sat on the damp earth and let my lantern exhale a breath of smoke and small sparks. The fireflies gathered like a congregation and listened, with that patient light they always lend to the broken. He did not speak at first, only shifted like a thing trying to find a way inside its grief. And his helmet was open to the fog, so that I could see the lines that time had carved into the soul beneath. There are hurts that name themselves loudly, and there are ones that become a stone in the chest, so heavy the world leans around it. His was the latter, a hurt sharpened by a single remembered tilt of the head and the echo of an order misheard. I did not offer easy absolution. Platitudes are lights that blow out when you most need a hand that knows how to lift a jar, not a sermon that brushes dust across a wound. Instead, I told him the form of other nights I had watched him keep, the small human stitches that make up a life people reduce to one failure when they are furious with themselves. I spoke of the time he bent, careful as a priest, to place a torn flag back onto its staff, so it might continue to fly for those who still had hope in their chests, and how his fingers trembled not with weakness, but with the knowledge of all that could be lost. I said these things as one might arrange jars on a shelf, each story a light you hand back to a person who has been starving on blame. And I watched the corners of his memory stir like moths. He kept returning to the moment he could not undo, the misread order, the charge that faltered, the king's face turning as if the world had betrayed him, and the image sat like a stone that would not slide away. So I did what I do best. I listened to the cadence of his shame as if it were a song I might learn to play differently. And I counted the beats until its rhythm thinned and opened into something else. I never speak for the dead, or for those who have been undone, because to speak too loudly is to steal the form of a story. Instead, I name the other truths silently visible to those who will look. The hands that helped, the moments of mercy, the stubborn smallness of bravery. When the night finally let a memory other than failure sit in the room, it was like a small glass jar given to me without a lid. He pointed with a gauntleted finger toward a cluster of light sealed in a hollowed acorn a little way from the oak. He said nothing, only breathed and let whatever shame had bound him loosen by the light of that single courage. And I walked with him to the jar, feeling the fog clasp our ankles like cold fingers. The light inside was fierce and honest, not the pale, hesitant glow of contrition, but the clear burn of a man who once stepped into danger to pull someone out. The memory was bright enough to make the surrounding moss look holy. I set my hands near the jar and felt the pressure of a story that had been kept too long, the way the skin over it had grown callous from regret. And I gently did what tending requires. I unsealed the lid. It is not my place to decide which memories must go, but it is my craft to rearrange them so they might be held without crushing the one who holds them. I lifted that bright thing and showed it back to him as if offering a mirror. He had expected fireflies to be comfortable rituals, familiar lights to trade for the sorrow. Instead, he saw his brave act whole and unfractured, not reduced by the catastrophe that followed, but framed by the courage that preceded it. There was a moment, a breath between two beats, when his armor trembled and the stone in his chest warmed as if heat could make the past malleable. And he murmured a name that was neither apology nor indictment, but recognition. I guided him to set that memory into the world again, not to forget the king, nor the order, nor the price paid, but to permit himself the fullness of who he had been. Flawed, yes, and earnest, and capable of tenderness in the midst of battle. He placed the glowing jar on the knotted root, and the light spilled like a small sunrise over the moss. It did not erase the stain of what had gone wrong, but it carved a quiet space where the man could be more than his worst hour.
The change was almost unnoticeable to anyone who is not listening for such things. An unsteady breath found steadiness, a hand unclenched. A helmet that had seemed fused to his brow slid back as if loosened by mercy. He rose not as a man remade into heroism, but as someone permitted to try again in a life that might be different, to carry a lighter burden because he had allowed himself a different memory to balance the weight. I do not perform miracles. The forest is patient, but it is not cruel. And what I offer is not absolution handed down, but a place where a soul can be rearranged with kindness until it fits the world less jaggedly. He bowed his head once, not to me, but to the memory we had tended together, and for the first time since I had found him, he let a small laugh loose. A sound like chain link falling into water, raw and honest. We talked until the lantern ran low and the fireflies crowded the jar as if to see who would be given back to daylight. And in the hush between words, the night taught me something I already knew but needed to feel. That people are not the sum of their worst act. I left him beneath the old oak with a jar of bright courage at his feet. And as I walked away, I felt the fog fold differently, less like a shroud and more like a veil that could be lifted when the right hands reached through. There will always be nights when a soul clings to its failings as if they are the only true things it owns. And there will be others like me who learn the slow work of showing a fuller face to those whose vision has been narrowed by pain. The old oak keeps his story now, along with the others who come to rest in the dark. Not because I erase what happened, but because I teach the forest to remember them whole. Not only the failures, but also the small resistances toward goodness that refuse to be forgotten. If there is instruction in our work, it is simply this: do not let one wrong define the measure of a life. Bring light where grief has made corners too sharp to live in, and you will find that mercy is as practical as a lamp and as necessary. That was the favor I offered the fallen knight. Not to unmake his sorrow, but to make room inside it. A place where a single brave act might breathe and become enough to carry him into another chance. Go lightly, I told him without saying the words aloud. And know that the light you carry is both small and terribly important. And sometimes, the world needs nothing more than that small light to begin again. Take this with you. To tend is not always to hold on. Sometimes to tend is to hand a person the light they have misplaced. And by doing so, you set both them and yourself free in measures you cannot yet imagine. In the end, if there is a form to what we do, it resembles this humble fact. We give permission. Permission to remember the whole story. Permission to carry sorrow and courage side by side. Permission to step into another life with a lighter pack. Be patient with the ones who cannot forgive themselves. They have been hauling stones alone for too long, and they will not pass them easily. Show them the brighter jars and help them place those lights where they can warm a way forward. The night kept its hush, but the rustle of wings and the soft chiming of glass-made memories felt like a benediction. And I walked back to my cottage with hands that smelled of moss and lantern smoke, and a heart a little less tilted by grief. Remember,
Mercy is a small, persistent light you keep passing into other hands until the dark becomes something less fearful to look at. And in that passing, we become human again. As I put the jars in their places and closed the lid on the lamp, I listened for the quiet of the forest and felt, for a moment, not the weight of duty, but the warmth of choosing to set one memory back into the world. And so I keep my watch. Not because I must, but because in the giving of light I find a life worth living. If there is a lesson here, hold it like a jar in your hands. A single brave act deserves to be seen. And when you show it to someone who only sees shame, you might just give them permission to stand again and try.